Hey, it's BCS, and today I am very excited to announce the release of Minisprite 1.0. Now, I posted a couple weeks ago on my blog, which I'll post in the description, that I was starting on a C64 project, and I decided I wanted to make just a simple tool that let me jump back and forth between sprite editing and code editing in Turbo Macro Pro, all on my actual Commodore 64C, and Minisprite is that tool. So first, you can see here some just basic instructions on launching and using. I put it all here in the directory listing. But now I'm going to swap to another disk image, and you'll see this one just has a couple of tools. You can see what my actual workflow looks like. So first, we're going to load in Turbo Macro Pro. I will note that I did all the actual development on my real Commodore 64 and its 1541-2 drive. I'm demoing here in Vice because I just don't have a proper way to record off of the Commodore 64 yet. Turbo Macro Pro, it loads into memory address 8000 hex. And so its code, the assembler and the editor, goes from 8000 up, and then your source code actually goes from 8000 down. There. And now I will load in Minisprite. Oops. And now Minisprite loads in from memory address 1000 hex and takes up not quite all the way up to 2000 hex. I do want to try to get this down a bit more. Right now it takes up about 3K of RAM. That leaves a little over 24K of RAM for source code and your assembled binary of whatever it is you're making. Now, for any bigger projects, I actually need to, and honestly typically do, I use the REU version of Turbo Macro Pro. That actually puts your assembled program into a separate memory bank, so it gives you a lot more room. But for now, let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, sys32768 is how you get into Turbo Macro Pro. This is not intended to be a proper tutorial on how to use Turbo Macro Pro. I'm happy to do a video on my actual workflow for bigger projects, jumping between multiple files using RAM banks. I also want to note that Robin over at 8-Bit Show and Tell has done a few great videos on Turbo Macro Pro. It's actually where I learned how to use it. And there's also a number of other videos. But all right, so since Minisprite is loaded at 1000 hex, we are going to load at 2000 hex. We'll go ahead and do just some really basic initialization, clear the interrupt, disabled, clear decimal mode, because why would anyone use it? Now we're going to load our sprite into memory at 3000 hex. Sprite pointers, they're actually just the memory address divided by 64 bytes. The reason is a sprite takes up 63, 64 is easier for math. So 3000 hex divided by 64 is 192, so our sprite pointer is 192, and we're going to store that in 07F8 hex. Now that is the default memory location for sprite pointer 0. And then we need to set the position. Now sprite positioning is a bit weird on the Commodore 64. You use X of 24 and Y of 50 to show in the top left corner of the screen, not 0, 0. Why those values? Well, sprites are 24 pixels wide, so it allows you to place the sprite off screen to the left and smoothly scroll in. Why is 50 the top and not 21, since sprites are 21 pixels tall? I don't know, because that's just how the VIC2 counts raster lines. But so this, we'll go ahead and put the sprite position at, we'll do 5100. It'll be kind of a left-ish. Now, why is it not? There we go. That was weird. Now, D1000 and D1001 are the X and Y position for sprite 0. Now, there's also a single bit for each sprite in D010 because sprites can move past 256 because it's 320 pixels wide. So we'll just set that all to 0. So none of them are going to be there because we're only using sprite 0 in this. All right, now we just need to set up the sprite palette, which means I first need to define the sprite. So let's jump out of Turbo Macro Pro. We'll use the back arrow and 1, and then sys4096 jumps into Minisprite. So we're just going to draw something simple. In this case, I'll just do a little Hey It's BCS logo. For color 0, we'll switch to black. Let's go RGB. So color 1 will be 2, which is red. Color 2 will be 5, which is green. And color 3, oops, I switched that. Color 3 will use 14. So here, 2 is 5, and 3 is 14, which is E in hex. Now just hit 1 to switch, and then we'll go ahead and draw something real quick. And now I can actually use the mouse also. Now I'm not very good at drawing, as you can see. Why I stick to platforms with limited number of pixels. I can barely handle this many. There we go. We'll go ahead and hide the mouse cursor. Now we'll go ahead and hit S to save this out, and then we'll save it to, in the top right, it says D9 because I'm working on drive 9, and it's going to save it to a file called sprite out. And once you can see the cursor flickering, that means we're done. Q to exit, sys32768, and I'm right back in Turbo Macro Pro. So we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and make a label for the sprite data. Now it's back arrow E to enter the file name that we want to enter. This takes a sequential file, the SEQ file that we wrote out with Minisprite, and it just enters it as source code. In this case, a bunch of byte statements because it's data. So there is our sprite. Before we load this, we need to set our palettes, enable multicolor, enable the sprite, and then copy the sprite data. So with multicolor sprites, color 1 is actually the first shared multicolor. Every multicolor sprite shares that. So we'll go ahead and set that to red, which is color number 2. And that goes into DO25. Color 2 is actually the sprite's individual color. Now that was green, so we'll set that to 4. And that goes in DO27, which is the first color for sprite 0. It goes 28 is for 1, 29 is for 2, etc. And then lastly, 14 is our second multicolor. That is the blue, because that is E in hex, and we'll put that in DO26. And there we go, our colors are loaded. Now we enable it. So we're going to just set 1, which is for sprite 0. We will first turn on multicolor, which is DO1C. And then we will go DO15, which is sprite enable. And now we're going to disable double width and height. By default, they're disabled, but in the editor, it actually enables them. So we'll just go ahead and clear that up. And there we go. So now all the sprite data is set up right. We just need to actually load it into memory. So we'll do a really simple loading loop. We're going to load from sprite data, which is the label where we inserted the data earlier. We're going to store it to 3000, like I said. Then we just decrement x, and as long as it's greater than or equal to 0, we will continue the loop. And now we're just going to loop forever. And now we can run with back arrow 3, assembles and runs, hit S, and you can see there our little sprite displayed, and I typoed one of the colors. So let's go ahead and fix that. We'll run stop, get this back here. Now we're going to jump back into Minisprite just to double check those colors, because clearly I have one wrong. Now Color 1 was going to be red, which is 2. Color 2 was going to be green, which is 5, not 4. And then color 3 was again 14, which is E. That's what it's supposed to look like. So we need to set 5. So we'll quit this, jump back in. We'll go edit our code where we loaded the colors. Here's where I misplaced it. And then we can assemble it again. And boom, there we go. It's all good. It's a really simple workflow. It lets me jump back and forth between whatever project. Obviously, this just draws the sprite. It's not exciting, but it lets me jump back and forth between my code and my sprite editor without any friction whatsoever. Now, I linked the blog post in the description. Please let me know if you're interested in more little tools like this, more retro Commodore 64, probably going to do some Game Boy Color in the future development. I also have an NES mini game kit I built for another project I'm helping on. And I might make a little mini game with that in one of these videos. Just let me know what's interesting and have a great day.